Welcome to the SEO Insider with your host, Seth Price, founder of BluShark, taking you inside the world of legal marketing and all things digital.
Welcome, Jordan, the Director of Attorney Education from Smokeball, to the Insider. So thankful to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I am so excited to have you here because, as both a law firm owner and agency owner, we know we're all scrambling to figure out how to integrate AI into our lives. And I know Smokeball has been very vocal and forward thinking in that. But you also know, putting on your lawyer hat, that it is one thing to talk about integrating AI into a firm, and it is another thing to actually do it. So with that as our thesis today, Jordan, what say you when it comes to trying to figure out how to take the theory and the benefits of AI and actually delivering it to a law firm?
And it's my philosophy about change management too, just in general, is, start small and give the why, to your clients and to your customers, specifically to your law firm. So for instance, at my old law firm, they would have these mandates about technology and say, okay, we're going to start using XYZ, but then they wouldn't really tell us the why. And so obviously a bunch of attorneys and paralegals who are already overworked and underpaid, and now you're saying, oh, you need to learn this new piece of technology, but we're not given a why. We're just saying, oh, this is what the, powers on high have said. Go forth and do this. So I think it does not help. And I think for morale for your firm, it absolutely doesn't help. So first of all, you need to show your firm the why. So if we're implementing AI, why are we doing it? What's it going to do? Is it going to save me time? Right. Exactly. Because otherwise, why do I want to use it?
We're going to save a body. That doesn't do anything for them. Is it going to make their lives better? Will they be home faster to their family? Like, what's the advantage?
Right. What I say about legal technology, including generative AI, is that if it doesn't make me more money or if it doesn't give me more free time back in my day, I do not want it. And so same rule applies to showing your staff, like, hey, this is actually going to make your life easier. You just got to learn it. So I kind of equate it to what document automation used to be, where everybody was kind of going into it kicking and screaming. They were like, oh, is this going to put me out of a job? Is this going to be more hassle than it's worth? And then turns out document automation is actually amazing. And the firms that use it love it. And that's now, part of their daily practice and workflows. So generative AI is kind of the same to me, where I think everybody's a little bit freaked out to start it. And lawyers are just a reticent bunch, myself included. But when it comes to AI, what I try to do is just start small. So starting with, hey, let's start using it to draft an email to a client, and what that does, and since it's fully integrated into your practice management software, that means all I have to do is tell Archie, which is our generative AI product, just say, Archie, draft this email to the client about their upcoming deposition, include XYZ, and then Archie will draft it. I click a button, it goes into Outlook, and then it's sent. And then it's automatically saved down because it's all integrated into your practice management software. So that's kind of how I have them start. Because to me, the biggest bang for your buck with AI integrated into your practice management software a lot of times comes down to emails.
Right. And I see that on it's funny because I see that on, we use Gmail for part of the firm and Outlook for part of the firm, but Gmail now has this cool AI stuff. And that's exactly where our first piece was. It's like, okay, guys, even if AI scares you, you can try it for drafting emails and take a baby step in that way to get somebody who might otherwise not. Because my original goal was to have a chat GBT up on everybody's computer and have them be able to play with it throughout the day. And that's gotten me nowhere.
Yeah, no. What I like to do and how I started off is I take some of my trials and tribulations, excuse the pun, with, for instance, opposing counsel and then applying that to generative AI. So for instance, I'm in family law, so all the drama all the time with that. And sometimes that also means drama with opposing counsel. So I would be having to send these emails to opposing counsel. Sometimes you write that email to opposing counsel that you do not send yet, and you take a step back because you can't tell them that you hope they die in a dumpster fire. And so you draft the email, take a step back, go grab some coffee, come back, and then you're editing yourself, right?
You clearly didn't see my LinkedIn post about my first deposition ever, where I had, I didn't know what I was doing. I was scared to death. There was this woman across the table from me. We were going at it. And as soon as it was over, I'm like, hey, we're in Iowa. We're 35 minutes from Field of Dreams. You want to go? And we jumped in the car and went to Field of Dreams together and spent the afternoon there. So, yes. Anyway, that's I digress.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I just have a little bit of a rage problem, which I've worked on. But as far as generative AI goes, a lot of times it's just changing and moderating your tone. So instead of me sending that email to opposing counsel or having to edit it myself to
Well,
make it nicer, I can go and just have generative AI do it for me.
and that's the part that I do love about AI, right? So the other day I've been playing around with it. I feel like I'm always behind the curve, even though I'm pushing myself as hard as I can. And I've done a few funny things, right? We saw it a ways back where you could like take it on social and write a much more flowery post than my normal very short one. But I think it is brilliant for that because there's a lot of pleasantries. My emails and texts are very short. That's just who I am. Maybe it's the New Yorker in me. And the idea that you can put thank you so much for that question. I'm so glad that you asked. There are 3 different ways to look at it. And you're putting all this stuff rather than saying, hey, you turd, like, this is clearly the way it should be. It gives you all of those back and forth in words that I'm not going to take the time to write. So I really enjoy the formatting, so much so that I actually now put, when I'm playing with it, if I send it internally, I put written by AI below it, just so I don't freak out my management team. Because we were doing our quarterly the other day, and she's like, I lost it because you sent this very beautiful crafted email instead of the normal one sentence thing. It's just, oh yes, he's playing with AI.
That's amazing. Well, and we also, I'll say this, we used to have a baby attorney that we hired who had a problem with tone, was a little bit too friendly in all of their emails. Yeah, so that's just another training, it's just another training, aspect of things where that baby associate could have used something like Archie to make her tone a little bit more professional and then learned from that too.
I'm so glad I use the term baby attorney all the time. And when I was a baby lawyer, and I've never heard anyone else use it. So I'm glad that there's other people using the term.
Oh yeah, we exist. We were one. We need to remember, go back to our roots.
Exactly. That was the story from Field of Dreams. That was literally, first month baby attorney. No idea what I was doing.
Oh gosh, when you're just trying to not commit malpractice every day of your life.
And
Yep.
like you wouldn't even know what malpractice was if you committed it.
Yep. And that's another problem with AI, right? Where it's like you have to kind of tell yourself.
AI is that baby attorney.
Mhm.
And there are parts of it where they're able to figure stuff out that's genius, but every once in a while there's going to be a hallucination. And that to me, that's where, my number one mantra is do no harm. And you're always balancing, like, there's risk in everything you do, getting out of bed in the morning. My ethics lawyer used to tell me this. So it's that balance. How do you balance that when sort of trying to work with people, not just employees, but let's think about it as a firm owner. Very often you have direct reports and then mid-level managers. It may be several steps down. How do you make sure that the mindset of it's a tool, but it's not perfection, and that it could be hallucinating? How do you get the benefits without people taking it blind faith and just putting it out there, as we've seen a few high-profile cases over the last few months?
Yeah, something in the water in New York, I think, for some of those. But how I view it and how I tell clients to treat generative AI is to treat it like it's a bumbling summer associate. So it is very eager to please, absolutely wants to provide you the answers that you are seeking, but it's not yet an attorney. You would never trust its work product outright, right? A summer associate isn't going to give you a brief and you're immediately going to turn around and file it with the court. Never going to happen. You're always going to double check that. You're always going to site check that. So I say it's the same thing as far as using generative AI, where you are responsible for the oversight of this program. So take nothing at face value, absolutely shepherdize and site check your cases, and then go from there. But again, it's just so eager to please. And that's what kind of turns into hallucinations, right? Because it so desperately wants to give you the answers that you want. And so it's going to sometimes make up some things in order to get there. So it's on us to oversee that and figure it out.
Right. And I think that it is the analogy. As a partner, I was that green associate. Your associate can come up with hallucinations. And
Yep.
if you treat it like a law clerk, that could be doing great work, or I'm told I'm not allowed to say this anymore, but is off their meds that day, don't know what you're getting. And when that happens, Like, I think that's why the managing attorney is the managing attorney and is compensated accordingly and has an ethical duty to supervise, because otherwise, look, you wouldn't be able to tell if somebody did something that was completely, transposed. But if it's complete gobbledygook, hopefully the human can detect it. That's the hope.
Yeah.
Because when it starts making up law that sounds convincing, next thing we know, we're like, okay, now we're in real trouble.
Yeah. Well, and I remember one time I was mentoring a baby associate with my prior firm, and they'd given me a brief, and I'm looking at it, and I was like, I know this case backwards and forwards that she cited. This holding is the opposite that she's telling me. And so that's on me, though, to go and double check and then talk to her and say, hey, you gave me the wrong holding for this case. I do not know why, but let's fix it. So, I mean, we're prone to error. Generative AI is prone to error. It's just yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel that as we evolve, the hallucinations hopefully less, but even what they are, it's just sort of like I always say, you don't check common sense at the door. The problem is as it gets so good. And I think that's sort of the fear of, like, the self-driving car. It's all great unless it's not.
Yeah.
Is it better? But at the same time, if you had associates or law clerks doing it, is it better than that even with the mess ups? And that's where,
Risk versus reward, right? Nothing ventured, nothing gained on that. And I think generative AI is the same. Like the fact that I can go and it's 10 p.m. the night before a hearing. I've spent 4 hours marking exhibits and I want to die and I'm ready to go home. And then I'm trying to get in my car and then I remember, oh, I haven't drafted an opening statement for tomorrow. So then I can just go ask my generative AI program, which, by the way, is integrated into my practice management software. So it knows my entire case backwards and forwards. It knows all of the documents that are in it, knows all the relevant information. So I can just say, hey, draft an opening statement for a temporary orders hearing tomorrow. Here's what I want. Here's my goal. Make it 5 minutes long.
Right. And in theory, what I'm hearing more and more is, there's this is, make it in the style of Mark Lanier. I mean, like, it's starting, like, depending on the AI program that you're on, if it knows who Mark Lanier is, all of a sudden, you have to make sure you own it and it's yours.
Right.
But, how would Clarence Darrow do this? It's getting to the point where you can bring other people in that you couldn't otherwise. And I think that's awesome. So look, I know you're a regular and a speaker at Tech Show. What coming up are you most excited about? Like, what is the with Tech Show coming up in a couple months? What is the what when you go there? What are you looking for?
AI is always the big thing. Like, what did we talk about before AI? Who knows? But so that's the biggest thing I'm talking about AI and family law, particularly how you're actually going to use it. I feel.
But that's again, and that's the doubt. Isn't that the stress? There's always a person applying it and knowing when is this super valuable and when is this just ChatGPT in a different private GPT in a different form.
Or then otherwise it's just this nebulous subject that exists, but nobody knows how, especially for family law, nobody knows how we're using it inside of our actual practices. So that's a big thing for me, is actually showing that, because otherwise a lot of it's geared toward big law, which is never going to be applicable for what I do, right? So it's just nice to be able to hear from other attorneys, especially family law attorneys, how they're using it. And then the other thing, which is kind of related to AI, but just in general related to legal tech, I feel like we hear a lot about all these like flashy articles that are about the death of the billable hour, and how technology is going to do away with that and how we're all moving to flat fee and things like that, which to me I laugh at. As a family law attorney, I hear these headlines, oh, billable hour is going, it's dying. Absolutely not in my profession.
I would argue that if anything, the lawyers may want it to die.
Yeah, I would love it, but it's just not.
But what we're seeing, and part of it got pushed by ethics rules, but we've moved to milestones in a lot of places, which is a version of a flat fee. Mm-hmm. And that is the area where, if you're adopting AI well, you have the opportunity to make more than your billable hour. And to me, that is the exciting part. Like, if you're looking for the opportunity, like right now, assuming that you are doing everything by the book, you can make X amount per hour. You can add on some, you may have an associate, you may, with a certain margin, you may have staff, but that's the most, like, somebody always says to me, I have a family law firm that makes X. And I'm like, how many attorneys do you have? And I can very quickly tell within a reasonable amount whether or not that's even possible, right? Because you know what the maximum somebody could bill and the maximum number of hours you could bill, and you know it's never that much anyway. But to
Yep.
me, what's exciting is you may get to the point where the billable hour should be dead because you can do so much with that hour that if the value to somebody for the case is what today is hypothetically $400 an hour, and it would take you 5 hours, and the person would pay $2,000, that you should be at some point able to say, you know what, for $1,600, it's done, no questions asked. And that AI is going to allow only 1 hour of your labor. That's the dream.
That's the dream, but to me, an impossibility. Like if you are if you are someone that practices a heavy litigation practice, where I have no control over the emails that opposing counsel sends me or an opposing party if they're wonderfully pro se. I have no control over what the judge orders. I have minimal control sometimes about what happens in that case, but I know that I have to respond to XYZ. If there's discovery, things like that. Not all cases need discovery. So at some point, I understand what you're saying, and that would be the dream. But when it's litigation and when you have multiple hearings happening in a case, maybe there's 3 within a month, it's just extremely difficult to see a billable hours.
But the more you're a repeat player in a sandbox and you know who the judge is, not that the judge couldn't switch out, opposing counsel is, although that could switch out, you can start. And I think that because I come criminal law centric. Our firm is criminal, family, and PI, but half criminal. So we're like one of the early large scalable. And I always think that we do flat fees in criminals, not by the hour. Essentially, you're reverse engineering the needs of that client. And so, again, I don't think the average lawyer out there thinks this way, but when setting a flat fee, to a certain extent, you are reverse engineering the likelihood it's going to go to trial, whether that's included or not. You're going to have the how much personal time does that client want? If you have a client that texts you questions, that's awesome. But if you have a client that every text is a return phone call where they want to speak for a half hour,
But then the problem is you don't know that until they get onboarded.
well, but that's my point. But as you start, there are certain telltale signs and things, that are I'm looking a future facing is that you'll start to put data points in based on different demographics. For example, I'm making this up, but under 35 is tech centric and is going to take less time than over 50, where everything is a phone call. And I'm just saying, like, will it be perfect? I'm saying statistically significant, where if you had 10 people under 35, it will be less client communication time, less time client communication, where it'll be more text heavy. I think that those things will start to happen over time, and then I already see it. Like, look, I when I did intake for my own firm, we have 50 lawyers now, and I think 30 people doing intake in some form or fashion. But when I did intake, I could tell based on the pause from me saying hello to somebody speaking as to whether or not there was money to pay for the case.
Mm-hmm.
I was thrown out. There was one factor I'd be wrong on. Southerners throw that theory out. They converse slower. But if you're not a Southerner and you pause too long between hello, my theory is that the time is not of value to you at the same level, and you're likely not going to have money. Again, I'm not hanging up on the person because they take too long to pause. But as game theory, I was able to pretty accurately determining the viability of funds based on and I think that with time, that there will be opportunities for those who choose to start to. There were people are you familiar with like Lee Rosen?
Mm-mm.
He was an early adapter of family law flat fees. He ran and there's a new guy, I just spoke to him the other day, who's in the Midwest, who has a really neat firm doing flat fees in family. And it's not flat fee for the entire case. It's in segments and there's all sorts of, pieces to it. But I truly believe that if lawyers master those pieces, which are not easy, that there'll be opportunities to be win-win, where the client is taken care of better. It's not like it's going to be from a case that was 100,000 to a case that's 20,000, but it's a case that's 100,000 to 80 where you're not working. And I think the elephant in the room very often, off the top, is those baby lawyers. Anybody who's throwing a baby lawyer on a case, I know for years, many corporations that won't allow baby lawyers to bill. They're
Yeah.
like, yeah, all the first years you want, I'm not paying for it. And
Mhm.
so nobody should have been paying for my first year billables. And so the question is how, and I think again, two things have happened going into tangent. Two things have happened over the last few quarters, which is virtual offices, virtual working, where it's
Yeah.
harder for the baby lawyer to become ingrained and trained, and
Yeah.
now AI. And so with people working off site, I think that the mentoring is slower than it would be. Maybe I'm just old and I prefer it in person, the serendipity, but that's one. And then secondly, the fact that certain things that you use in a first year associate for document review and others, AI is going to be able to participate in. And so that combination, I think, it's not like I'm saying, oh, the billable hours are gone, forget about it. But I think it brings both of those things into question for lawyers intellectually to be thinking what comes next, because it may not be exactly as it is today.
I agree with what you're saying. I'm just very curious to see how that plays out. I specialized in high asset divorces and
Okay.
child custody cases. And so it's just it would
Very
just be very
contentious.
difficult. Yeah.
And there may be thresholds in it that say we're here for X number of hearings. There are caps on what that is because you have to protect yourself on the downside. I remember there was a guy who signed a criminal case on a very high profile case years ago dealing with lacrosse players in DC who signed for $4,000 and another guy had a billable rate on it and it became high profile. It was all over the news. The guy billable billed $100,000 and the other guy got 4,000 flat. Um,
Yeah.
there are places where you have to protect yourself. I just think that if you have somebody as forward facing as yourself, that with time you're going to be able to handicap that and arbitrage that difference. That it's not for the faint of heart, but I do believe that there will be now. If you know your practice, I have friends in New York that bill between $1,000 and $1,500 an hour on family law cases, who are just badass. They don't have SEO. They are the top three people in the city for what they do, and they get all the hedge fund people. Yeah, bill your numbers per hour. The question is, will it get to a point where in a more mundane family law case that you really do know, if you took all your family law cases and averaged it out, in the criminal case world, you see this, and this was game theory I remember from way back. We had criminal lawyers, and I'm trying to think this goes back 15 years, so I hope I get these numbers right, who were charging $3,500 for a DUI and $1,500 for trial. And we were losing cases to people charging $4,000 flat.
Interesting.
And I said, including trial.
Yeah.
And they were like, we can't do that. I'm like, okay, what number of cases go to trial? I'm making this up, but let's say it's 1 out of 20. And I'm like, what's the true cost of going to trial? And I think the number was like $8,000. So I'm like, okay, at $8,000, that's 800, that's $400 per. It's almost like you're anteing in $400 per case. So essentially, if you in a perfect world charge $3,900 per case, you'd be ahead of the game theoretically
Mhm.
compared to 4,000 as a flat fee. And there was sort of that moment. So so we're like, okay, great, we're gonna go with a $4,000 flat fee. Great. Now there was an issue, which was with flat fees, a higher percentage of people went to trial, right?
So they're like, I'm already all in. Why not?
Or I'm already paid. Like, why not? Like, what the
Mhm.
hell? Roll the dice. So we had to come back with a hybrid that was like a $3,900 for pre-trial and just a $350 trial fee. We didn't really want the money for it. You just wanted somebody to think. I remember when my kids were little, there was the urgent care line at our pediatrician's office had like a $35 after hours fee. Call anytime you need it for emergency. There was, and it may have been less. It might have been $15. It was something nominal. And I still remember to this day thinking every time I called, is it worth that? And I ended up calling a friend with a pediatrician instead. But my point is, it's stuck that anything forcing it. And I think that those are when you have these and you start to think about how do you gamify, making sure that when you're doing it, you're thinking about what the repercussions are of including stuff in. Because if somebody does know that it's a flat fee, imagine how your phone's going to ring comparatively.
Right. And I'll say this, when we do, for instance, for jury trials, we did kind of the same thing to discourage jury trials where we always take a separate deposit, and usually it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 grand. So it's like, if you want to do a jury for a Texas family law case, let's go, but it's absolutely going to cost you more. So I think that, like you said, kind of makes
You really, that's your way of saying, I really don't want to be in front of a jury.
Well, it's like we absolutely could, but it is so much money. So it would depend on the size of the estate. But if I'm trying to be cost conscious for the client, depending on what they have, there's a big difference between if they have $1 million estate versus a $10 million estate. And now you're going to blow 50, 60 grand because you decided to go in front of a jury, which I said wasn't going to play well anyway. So it's just a nice reminder to kind of discourage them like, hey, do you think it's worth it that you're going to spend this $60,000 in addition to your regular legal fees just to try it in front of a jury when we've already told you that this is not going to end well?
Awesome. Well, listen, I'm excited. You're going to be speaking at Tech Show. What are you talking at Tech Show about?
Talking about AI and family law, and then also predictably practice management software and accounting reimagined.
Well, I can't wait. The bane of my existence was when none of the case management systems would integrate with QuickBooks Online for years and years. It was
and now
awful.
look, they all do.
Now they do, but it took a long, long time. So very thankful. Hopefully the AI integrations and adaptation go a lot faster.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, say hi to Chelsea and Emma for me, and can't wait to see you at Tech Show.
Sounds good. See you later, Seth.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the SEO Insider with Seth Price. Be sure to check back next week for fresh insights into building your brand's online presence. Episodes are available to stream directly on BluShark Digital's website.